Hello, I'm J. Jermaine Bay with Elodium Moist Pradium, Ante Colorado. The acronym is AMPAC. I'm the Chief Judge of Consular Court. Today is Class 76. Class 76. What did we learn in Class 75? Well, we learned that J. Bay don't play, right? What else did we learn? We learned, most important, that the Moors have delayed their own justice. The Moors for decades have been saying what? No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. What does that mean? That means that we've been pleading out. We're pleading. What does pleading mean? We've been begging. For what? Justice. Because we think that justice will bring us peace. And it absolutely will. But who are we asking to give us justice? We're asking the very people that we know are colonizers. Why would a colonizer take the time to enact legislation to give you peace? Because within your peace, they know you have a peace of mind, and you will start studying. Their obligation is to keep you what? In a status of despair, to make sure that your political status is not impropriate persona sub juris. What does that mean? All this time, our people have been begging, marching, praying. And the whole time, we've always had the answer in our hands. You ever ask yourself, why did they put us in a status where they told us we were not allowed to read and write? They did not want us to understand who we were as a people, and they did not want us to understand how to understand the true definition of justice. And what is justice? Treaties. But you can't enforce a treaty unless you know who you are. So when you say no justice, no peace, guess what? We've delayed our own justice. It's self-inflicted. Why? Because we have a lack of knowledge of self. And we just simply understood that we are Moroccans. And we simply understood that we are not black. We're not colored. We're not Negro. We're not African American. We're not Moorish American. We're not Indians. We're not Pan-Africans. And we sure as hell ain't white people. Which is another miseducation that we've been taught, that we are white persons. We're not white persons as a legal status. We're simply Moroccans. So therefore, we perish by the day for a lack of knowledge of self. Because if we understood ourselves, we would understand that we wield the sword of Excalibur. And Excalibur has been sitting in a neutral position, waiting for us to pull it out and utilize it to wield the sword. The pen is mightier than the sword. But where does it start? It starts in our heads. It's Islam, I, self, law, and master. And if you don't know who you are, then how are you going to enforce your own justice? And that's why we keep pleading for someone else to recognize us, because we don't recognize ourselves. The entire time our treaties gave us the entitlement to enact legislation for ourselves. But you can't enact law for yourself unless you know yourself. The colonists have done a good job of blocking us from being competent Moors. What type of Moors? Moroccans. But when I say colonist doesn't have a face, it's an action. The colonists are pale-faced Europeans, and they're also brown-faced Europeans. They're sellout Moors, COINTELPRO Moors, conversal Moors. They blocked us from this information as well. Don't ever forget that. And the saddest part is all of us are in this together. You got Moors in the field and you got Moors in the house, but we all been naturalized and we all been colonized. And the whole time we've been begging and pleading, and the whole time we had a pen where we could enact our own legislation according to what? Our own Moorish treaties. All we had to do was take the time to read the instructions. But you'll never read the instructions if you don't recognize who the instructions are for. There are no instructions to get liberation from your occupation for black people. There's no instructions for that. The only instruction they set forth for black people is what? Civil rights. What instructions are there for Moroccans? Treaties, which is the supreme law of the land. What instructions are there for Indians? Right? You know what the instructions are for Indians? To be subjugated by the United States according to their own treaties. They said the United States could have the supreme jurisdiction over them through their federal courts. That's the answer to their test. They got to go back to the colonists because they did what? They agreed to the capitulation to allow the United States to have jurisdiction over them and their reservations. The instructions are there for everybody. If you go back and read it, you'll find out what your ancestors wrote down as instructions for you. But the question is, who are you according to your political status? Are you Negro? Are you black? Are you colored? Are you African American? Pan-African? Are you what? Indian? Moorish American? Or are you Moroccan? You got to figure out what your political status is. And who says you're Moroccan? Is that just by your own decree out of your mouth? It starts there in self. But after that, what do you have to do? You have to come back and consent to the entire laws of the empire according to the treaty. Those are the instructions. And if you fail to do it, then by default, you'll be out there marching and praying, saying no justice, no peace. And the whole time, you got the handcuff key in your hands. That must be understood. So we learned a lot in class 75. Most importantly, that the instructions to the test have been put into a book. The instructions to the test have been put into what they call proper written instruments, called resolutions from the United Nations, called constitutions, conventions, arrangements, right? All these things are in written text. But why did we know this? You know why we didn't know? Because we didn't know ourselves. We've been marching and praying for the past 100 years as Moorish Americans. Moorish Americans and black Americans are saying the same thing in terms of a chat. They're saying no justice, no peace. Moorish Americans just simply saying it through written affidavits and haven't figured out why there's been no remedy. Because your political status is incorrect. That's the truth. When we say the 5 principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, where is the truth in all of this? Because the truth brings the peace. And with peace, you have freedom. And how do you protect all that? With justice. But the justice starts in us. You have to justify who you are. And how do you do that? You need to be speaking to competent Moors who understand that they are Moroccans and not Moorish Americans. You have to go and speak to those that are competent so they'll tell you the truth. And the truth will set up the peace. And the peace will establish the freedom because now you put all that together, you got justice for yourself. What's been happening over the decades? We've been losing our leaders who finally figure out the answer to the test. Our good brother Martin Luther King was neutralized. Why? Because him and Malik Shabazz, i.e. Malcolm X, started talking about going where? To United Nations. Who neutralized them? Our own. Who paid us to neutralize them in terms of dirty Moors? The bankers. The bankers are paying our own people to block and neutralize our own people because we suffer from a lack of knowledge of self. When I think about the good brother Khalid Muhammad from the Nation of Islam, good brother. He says, I know I'm a Moor. Got sense enough to know I'm a Moor. But guess what? He was militant. He knew how to study. Khalid Muhammad was a wordsmith. He had courage. Next you know, he's neutralized. By who? His own. Everybody that started to figure out the answers to the test got neutralized. But this is different this time around. Why? Everybody I just mentioned, Martin Luther King, Malik Shabazz, commonly known as Malcolm X, Khalid Muhammad, countless others. How is it that the United States can neutralize them? You know why? Let me tell you the answer. It's because they did not have state protections by their own Moorish state. All of those good brothers and sisters that got neutralized, that was eventually trying to figure out they needed to go to the United Nations to seek assistance, to learn the answers to the test, to organize, to put together an organized dual society on behalf of our people. They got neutralized. How has the United States got away with that? I'll tell you. Because we did not have what's called privileges and immunities as diplomats, as officers of our state, as experts of our state. I need all the Moors to go look up what's called the United Nations Convention on Privileges and Immunities of the year 1946 that the United Nations put together 1 year after they enacted the Charter of the United Nations of 1945. The next following year, they put together privileges and immunities for who? Officers, diplomats, and experts of the state. These were state officials that had state ID. They were protected with immunities from who? Any other foreign power, i.e. any foreign state. You see, this time it's different, Moors. If you enact your competent Moorish state and you become an officer of your state, a diplomat of your state, an expert of your state, then your state will let the United States international organization know that you're on the list or the protected persons list as an officer, diplomat, and expert of your state. And now this time, let them touch one of us. Now they're going to have to deal with our consular court for war crimes. They're going to deal with our consular court for aggression. They're going to have to deal with our consular court for crimes against humanity. They got to deal with our courts for human rights violations. They got to deal with our courts for genocide. Against who? Officers of another state. Y'all ain't never asked yourselves, if they say that Putin's so bad, why haven't they just snatched him up? You know why? Because he's got privileges and immunities as an officer, diplomat, expert of his state. That's why he can walk around with his suits on, smiling, because they can't touch him. And Moors have the same rights, equal rights, if they are the authorized authority of their state. Malcolm did not have privileges and immunities. Martin did not have privileges and immunities. Khalid Muhammad did not have privileges and immunities. But we, as Moors in our competent states, will have privileges and immunities as state officials. This time it's different. They know they can't touch us now because we finally started doing what? Reading the instructions. You must understand what's happening now, Moors. This is different. We're in a new era. How is it they were able to get away with assassinating our people that finally started reading instructions? Because they were still citizens of the United States. Once you follow the instructions of the treaties and it says you must do what? Any subject of Morocco that's been naturalized in a foreign country must choose between the entire laws of the empire. Which means as soon as you return to Morocco, you're protected by Moroccan law. And if in fact you're fortunate enough to be a public servant of the state will protect you with privileges and immunities just like all other prime ministers on planet Earth. Just like other ministers of foreign affairs on planet Earth. Just like other consul generals on planet Earth and attorney generals on planet Earth. All judges on planet Earth have qualified immunities. All officers have qualified immunities, but you don't have qualified immunity as a citizen of the United States. This time is different. As you know, AMPAC always opens up with its Constitution. What is the Constitution for? Privileges and immunities. Where? A, within your latitude, longitude of your state's jurisdiction. Where else? And abroad, as soon as you cross over your state lines, those privileges and immunities travel with you all around planet Earth. Because you got state ID from your competent state. Your privileges and immunities travel with you. You ever heard the term, don't kill the messenger? You see, in international law, all diplomats, all officers and experts are messengers. Messengers of what? The word on behalf of their people from their state. So the Constitution affords you privileges and immunities if in fact you were a lucky few to be elected as a public servant, humble public servant of your state. That's what the Constitution is for. Because you sit in one of the offices of the Constitution. You represent the office of the state, and the state turns around and represents you under privileges and immunities. That must be understood. Let's move on. Okay, in class 75, we started getting into the Charter of the United Nations, breaking down the word nations, right? This is an image right here. This particular document I have is a combination of both the Charter and the International Court of Justice statutes, okay? So it's two different documents, but this one's combined. Just keep that in mind. So in the Charter of the United Nations, what is the United Nations all about? Well, we found out the word nation means what? State. So it's United States, right? Well, what about the United States? United States of planet Earth coming together to become what? One. You see it right here? Uni. Uni means one. One nation. One state. What do they mean by that? One. Come under one regulation, one rule, regulation, one set of what? Instructions, one set of what? Policies and procedures, one set of what? Laws. The Charter represents the HR department. They're the umpires, they're the referees. Between who? Competent states. Capital S states. Uni means one state. What about the one state? Rules and regulations that governs all states. Obviously, this is international law, right? It's international law. But let's look up this word charter. What's the charter all about? Remember what I told you, everything is about the title. Right? Everything's about the title. We already broke down nation, it's about states, United States, right? But it's a charter. But here's what you got to understand. Only states, nations, can establish a charter. A charter cannot establish states. So the United States, states around planet Earth, established the charter. But let's do a quick refresher and figure out, okay, what is charter again? Let's go over that again, right? Let's get into it. Mother, definition of charter, Black's Law Dictionary.
Charter, verb, in mercantile law, to hire or lease a vessel for a voyage. Thus, a chartered is distinguished from a seeking ship.
Okay, next word.
Charter, noun, an instrument emanating from the sovereign power in the nature of a grant, either to the whole nation, or to a class or portion of the people, or to a colony or dependency, and assuring to them certain rights, liberties, or...
Pause. Thank you very much, Mother. Okay, so what's a charter? Refresher, right? So a charter, noun, person, place, or thing. An instrument, proper written instrument, emanating from the sovereign power. So the sovereign power, who's sovereign? States. That's the first box of the triple principle, sovereignty and independence. States power. So the states came together of the United Nations and established what? The charter. From the sovereign powers of all the other states. In the nature of a grant. Well, who granted the charter? Well, the sovereign powers did that. Right? Listen. Right here, it says dependency, right? Dependency. Now, all of what? The states are dependent upon the charter to be the emanating instrument that sets up the rules and regulations on how states can deal with their contentious disputes. No different than a referee calls fouls, strikes, balls, etc. So all the states around planet Earth are dependent upon someone coming in as a mediator, an arbitrator, sometimes to adjudicate contentious disputes between who? Sovereign powers. This is how you avoid the scourge of war. You allow somebody else to come in as a third party to assist you with your dispute. So all states on planet Earth are dependent upon the charter members to assist with disputes with states. Why is this important to understand? Because the Moors, when we establish our states and we restore our statehood through post-millennium per consanguinity, we will have problems with who? The United States of America. And even when we issue our council court orders, judgments, and advisories, guess what we're going to end up having to do? We can't go to war with them. Why can't we go to war with the United States of America? Because our treaty prohibits it. Treaty of Peace and Friendship, Article 24 says what? Can be no scourge of war. Can't be no call to arms. So what do you have to do? You have to keep utilizing what? Friendly applications to set up the arrangements. So what's the friendly arrangement now? The Charter and its International Court of Justice. So when in doubt, pull out the treaty and take it to the International Court of Justice when you got problems with any other foreign state. You take it to the referee. But who's the first referee? Your consular court. Then you take it to what's called an ipso facto compulsory jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice. What does ipso facto compulsory jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice mean? It means the International Court of Justice does not have jurisdiction over more states. You have to allow them to come in and have jurisdiction to oversee that contentious dispute. They don't automatically have jurisdiction over your case. You have to petition the International Court of Justice. They become ipso facto, compulsory jurisdiction now over your case. In other words, they got to get permission to come in and perform a review. That must be understood. Okay, charter. Taking our time. Charter. Okay, so the charter, a charter differs from a constitution in that the former is granted by the sovereign, while the latter is established by the people themselves. So the people establish what? Constitutions. And then the Constitution can establish what? A charter. The charter always comes second. But the Constitution establishes the charter. On behalf of what? The state. All right? So here's what we need to understand. In 1945, the charter was established. By who? The sovereign powers. Who are the sovereign powers? All the states around planet Earth. Okay? 1945. But who gave them the grant? Let's go back to charter. Ultimately, who gave them the grant to establish the charter? Remember the definition of charter? Okay, let's take a look at it. It says there was a grant in order to establish the charter by the sovereign powers. The sovereign powers established the grant. They granted for the charter to be established. But remember what we learned about France. The United States of America and the other sovereign states around planet Earth did not have the ultimate power to provide the grant for the charter. France had to give the grant power to the other sovereign powers to establish the charter. Why is that? Okay. Because the Treaty of Fez of 1912. What happened in 1912? Okay, Mother.
The government of the French Republic and the government of His Sharifian Majesty, desirous of inaugurating a regular regime in Morocco based upon internal order and general security, which will make it possible to introduce reforms and to ensure the economic development of the country, have agreed upon the following.
Okay. So who got together? France and the Sharifian Majesty of Morocco, the empire, and allowed France to have an inauguration to oversee the empire of Morocco. And France became the general security over the empire. This is why France sits on the Permanent Security Council of the United Nations. Because France had the original security obligations, all by themselves. Let's go to Article 1.
The government of the French Republic and His Majesty the Sultan have agreed to establish in Morocco a new regime comprising the administrative, judicial, educational, economic, financial, and military reforms which the French government may see fit to introduce within the Moroccan territory.
Okay, so France, okay, and who? The Sultan got together on behalf of the Moroccan Empire to institute a new regime comprising of what? These 6 things: administrative, judicial, education, economic, financial, and military reforms, which the French government may see fit to introduce within the Moroccan territory, i.e. the empire. So France can institute what? What did the Sultan give France the power to do? Let's go back to it. to be the grantor, to allow the other signatory powers to establish the charter, and the charter will end up being the emanating document that governs all other states on planet Earth. Who gave France the power? The Sultan did that. Okay, well, let's finish reading the rest.
This regime shall safeguard the religious status, the respect and traditional prestige of the Sultan, the exercise of the Mohammedan religion, and of all religious institutions, in particular those of the Habus. It shall include the organization of a reformed Sharifian Maxim. The government of the Republic will come to an understanding with the Spanish government regarding the interests which this government derives from its geographical position and territorial possessions on the Moroccan coast. In like manner, the city of Tangier shall retain its recognized distinctive characteristic, which will determine its municipal organization.
Okay, so what happened? In 1912, Spain, the Spanish government had to work with the French Republic. Because in 1912, Spain was still occupying certain geographic locations of Morocco. In 1912. Keep in mind that the Moors and all the states were supposed to deposit all their international law with who? Madrid. We found that out in the Act of Algeciras. Madrid is where you deposit, right? But where's Madrid? Okay. Madrid. Madrid is in what? Here's Portugal, here's Spain, Madrid. Here's Tangier. Here's Morocco. So Spain was holding on and occupying under a regime of capitulation certain territories of Morocco. Keep in mind, this is still Morocco, however, it's got new names. So Madrid and Tangier were territories of Spain, and all the states were supposed to deposit all their international laws, such as treaties, etc., in these two places, Tangier and Madrid. Listen. So right here it says, listen, why are we going over this? We got to figure out, how did the charter come to be? I got to break this down because the Moors think the charter is the devil. So I got to let the Moors know, no, the Sultan set up the charter. The Sultan allowed France to oversee the empire. And France gave a grant to allow the charter to exist, which means the charter is part and parcel to the Moroccan empire. Listen. The geographical position and territory possessions of the Moroccan coast. In like manner, the city of Tangier shall retain its recognized, distinctive characteristics which will determine its municipal organization. So keep in mind, we were depositing documents with who? The instruction said, deposit with Tangier and Madrid. This is where all the documents were going, where you had to deposit all your international law, your treaties, etc. So now, going back to the Treaty of Fez, the municipal organization where people were depositing their treaties in 1912 was in existence. But guess what happened? In 1914, Spain relinquished its capitulatory regime, its control over the land, and gave it back to Morocco. When? 1914. And now that Tangier is no longer the place where now you would deposit your international law documents, by default now, France said, okay, well, Tangier is not the place for the what? Municipal organization that takes care of the depository. Now France had an opportunity now to transfer it where? Over here to the west. And place it where? Where's the new now organization where you deposit your documents? Commonly known as New York. Manhattan. But where's New York and Manhattan? In Morocco. All because Spain's Tangier, who was holding on to a military stronghold in Morocco, they gave up Tangier. Let's go back to the map. You see where Tangier is? In Morocco. So what Spain left the territory, now France, after 1912, after 1914, France could now move the municipal organization over to the west, commonly known as New York. Got a question, Mother?
Quickly, what do you mean when you say Spain gave up the land?
Okay, good question, Mother. All right, let's get into that. I was about to get to it, but you're quick on your feet.
Okay.
All right, here we go. This document I have up here on the board right now. This is France versus the United States of America, 1952 in the International Court of Justice. Page what? 190. At least on this document, far left corner, page 190. Okay? Page 190, France versus United States of America, 1952. Page 190, you come down and you find out what they talked about in the ICJ. What happened in the ICJ? Some things got disclosed. Mother?
The controversy between the parties with regard to consular jurisdiction results from the renunciation of capitulatory rights and privileges by Spain in 1914 and by Great Britain in 1937. The renunciation by Spain in 1914 had no immediate effect upon the United States position because it was still possible to invoke the provisions of the General Treaty with Great Britain of 1856. After 1937, however, no power other than the United States has exercised consular jurisdiction in the French zone of Morocco, and none has been entitled to exercise such jurisdiction.
Thank you, Mother. So what happened? In 1940, Spain renounced its capitulatory rights in Morocco. They said, look, we ain't holding on to no land no more by use of force. They were out. They gave the land back to Morocco. They ceded the land back to Morocco. They gave the powers back to Morocco. So now Spain had canceled themselves out. They abandoned whatever capitulatory regime they had in Morocco. They stepped out the way.
So they gave back to Morocco what they had before was a colony.
Correct. They were holding on to land in Morocco. Mm-hmm.
All of Spain?
Yeah, Spain was holding on to a little bit of land. Let's go back to the map.
Well, I know that, but I mean, they gave away all the land of Spain.
No. Spain was holding on to this little bit of land right here in Morocco, right up in this area. And Tangier fell into the Spanish territory that was being held by use of force.
Okay.
So they gave up this, and they said, okay, we're just going to be originally Spain, but we're going to give up this section right here that encompasses Tangier as well. All right?
Okay.
But also by doing that, by them saying we no longer have capitulation regime, and they walked away from all the Moorish treaties, what happened? Now we no longer even deposit at Madrid. So we don't deposit at Madrid, and we don't deposit at Tangier anymore, according to the treaties, because Spain walked away from the treaties. So going back to France versus United States of America. So now they say down here, let's read it from the top. The controversy between the parties with regard to consular jurisdiction resulted from the renunciation of capitulatory rights and privileges by Spain in 1914 and by Great Britain in 1937. The renunciation by Spain in 1914 had no immediate effect upon the United States position because it was still possible to invoke the provisions of the General Treaty with Great Britain of 1856. However, after after 1937, however, no power other than the United States have exercised consular jurisdiction in the French zone of Morocco, and none has been entitled to exercise such jurisdiction. So who was left? Only the United States and France controlling any type of land in Morocco. Now do you understand now why the charter has two languages of French and English? Because they were the only two holding on to a jurisdiction in Morocco. So in 1914, Spain said they're out. In 1937, Great Britain said they're out. Who's left? United States and France. And now that Spain say they're out after 1914, keep in mind the Treaty of Fez was signed when? 1912. So Spain's out in 1914, which opened up an opportunity for France to transfer the depository over to where? The West, i.e. New York, Manhattan. When? I'll show you when. (1945). Why? There was only two people left that was claiming any jurisdiction in Morocco. Who was that? France and the United States of America. And that's why both their languages is in the charter. Says you got to write things in what? French and English. But who was the original grantor who started all this with the charter? Let's go back to it. Let's go back to it. So we go back to what? Charter. But the charter has to be established by a grantor that allowed the sovereign power, such as the United States of America, to be part and parcel to the charter, along with all other states around planet Earth. But who gave the grant? Who gave permission for it to be commenced? France, right? And how did France get away with that? Because of the Sultan gave France the power to oversee all what? New regime, comprising, administrative, judicial, education, economic, financial, and military reforms, which the French government may see fit to introduce within Moroccan territory. So France established what? The Charter of the United Nations. On behalf of who? The Moorish Empire. And who gave France the permission to do it? The Sultan. Which makes the charter part and parcel to what? The Moroccan Empire. The Moorish Empire. What happened? Let's take a look at the board. The Charter of the United Nations of 1945. The charter is part and parcel of the Moorish treaties and Moroccan law via the Treaty of Fez of 1912. Wherefore, France commissioned the charter by decree and in the absence of the competent Moorish governments. How is it France had the powers of power of attorney to oversee our empire? Because the Sultan gave France the power to do it. But how did the Sultan end up with the power?
Because we were asleep.
Because the Moors did what? We acquiesced and allowed the Sultan to have jurisdiction over us as Moors. The Sultan as an office. The Sultan as an office was sitting in the office in the seat overseeing our vast estate. The Sultan was what? A trustee, a manager over our vast estate. This is why if you go back and look at the Kingdom of Morocco's constitution of the year 2011, you will look in there and see there's a dualist constitution. What does that mean? He split the constitution in half, said the Berbers and the Arabs share the land together. Well, who are the Berbers? The Mazai people. Who are the Mazai people? Moors. Who are the indigenous, aboriginal, autochthonous people of the land. And the Arabs, i.e. the Moroccans, are what? Trustees and managers overseeing the land, even though the Berbers are there, and they recognize the Berbers as the indigenous people, but yet The king of the kingdom of Morocco is still overseeing the land as a manager, as a trustee. Does that sound familiar to y'all? Listen. The United States of America, in name only, has trustees, the 7 board members of the Federal Reserve, and managers. So these 2 legal personalities act as trustee and manager over what? The Moroccan Empire. No different than the Sultan was doing over the Moroccan Empire, over the Moorish government, over the Moorish land. So the same thing that's happening in the kingdom of Morocco is still happening today over here in the West. We've allowed trustees and managers to oversee our land. They put us all in a protectorate status. Put Moors in a protectorate status. Who was the first protector over us? The Sultans, i.e. who? The Ottomans. The Ottoman Empire. They conquered the Moors. And once they conquered the Moors around 789 AD, 789 AD, when they first started having their first dynasties in Morocco, around 789, somewhere around that time. If you go and look it up, okay, if they started around 700, then who was there before them? Moors, who look like you and I. But what do? We acquiesced and allowed them to come in and conquer us, and they were running the show all the way up until when? 1912. Then they turned around and gave the empire to who? France. Go ahead, Mother.
I'm sorry, I might be getting a little ahead, but what comes to mind is, so that document that Biden has on his desk, that gives us back everything.
Yes.
Everything.
You're referring to Public Law 856.
Yes.
Which is commonly known as 8 Stat 484, 34 Stat 2905. Most Moors know as what? Title 22, Chapter 2, Sections 141 to 143, and sometimes known as 22 USC 141. So that document that the president has on his desk as of today was signed on August 1st, 1956, that allowed the president of the United States, after the Congress signed a bill and gave it to the United States in August 1st, 1956, allowed the president to sign it immediately to relinquish jurisdiction in Morocco.
But he hasn't signed it.
Why?
Because we didn't
Because the Moors out there said what? No justice, no peace. Instead of having a treaty and a pen in their hand that says, Constitutional Court said, you shall relinquish extraterritoriality jurisdiction in Morocco. Or we're taking you to the International Court of Justice. And if the International Court of Justice does not prevail, then we'll take them to the International Criminal Court, the ICC. And you know what the ICC does? They remove heads of state as individuals, heads of state. They'll remove the office of president of that international organization. See, we don't have to call to arms. We just got to know how to use this arm. This is Excalibur. This is how you get your peace. This is your justice, not your feet, your pen. Make no difference how loud you shout it. It ain't going to make a difference. It's falling on deaf ears. Why? Because the colonists know you got treaties that already afforded you and entitled you to your own rights to make your own legislation. What happened? Show you how much power France had because of what? Our Moorish treaties. Why are we going over this? Because we're getting ready to go deeper into the Charter of the United Nations. We got to start with the title. we got to read first and get a what? An understanding. We got to scrutinize, discernment, forensics. We got to pour over. We got to devour all these words. Period. You don't move on until you have a fundamental understanding of what you're reading. Stop pronouncing words. Moors, we've delayed our own justice because we don't know how to read. What does read mean? Take your time, look up the words, break them down. Okay, what happened? Okay, France. Look at the power France had. Okay, mother, let's start from the top.
On January 25th, 1919, in Paris, delegates to the Peace Conference formally approved the establishment of a commission on the League of Nations with a grant from France.
Continue.
On June 26, 1945, in San Francisco, geographically located in Morocco, the delegates of the UN Charter formally approved the Charter of the United Nations with a grant from France.
Pause. So the United Nations, or should I say the League of Nations, was first established when? January 25th, 1919. Right? So the Treaty of Fez comes out in 1912. Right? Spain relinquishes jurisdiction, 1914. France immediately establishes what? A League of Nations, which was the first charter of the United Nations, to try to bring the states together. Why? Because France is controlling what? The empire. With what? Pen. Excalibur. So look what happens. So France gives the grant for the League of Nations to be established in 1919 for all the states to come together. France is overseeing it.
What document is this?
This is my own document.
Oh.
Okay. Then right here, on June 26, 1945, in San Francisco, geographically located in Morocco, the delegates to the United Nations Charter formally approved the Charter of the United Nations with a grant from France. How did all this come to be? Okay. A treaty. This is how powerful treaties are, boys. If France had this much power as what? A power of attorney to establish the League of Nations and the United Nations Charter, imagine how much power you have with your pen and you're a Moor. But you have not imagined that type of power. You know how I know? Because you're out there marching and praying, saying no justice, no peace, and France knows how to utilize your pen and you don't know how to utilize it. Why? Because this information has been blocked from us. By who? Our own. As well as the pale-faced Europeans. So what is France doing? Okay, they're doing 6 things. Let's take a look at the 6. What are they doing? They're doing what? Instituting new regime comprising of administrative, judicial, educational, economic, financial, and military reforms. Where? In the Moroccan territory. So what's happening? Mother?
Who gave France the full power of attorney privileges? The office of the Sultan of Morocco in correlation with the Moorish Empire. See Treaty of Fez, 1912, Article 3, and the Act of Algeciras, 1906, Article 32.
Okay, pause. So who gave France the power of attorney? The Sultan. Who gave the Sultan the power? Moors. How? We acquiesced. We got conquered. By the Ottomans. By the Persians. By the Turkish. By the Mohammedans. By the Islamic nation. And they turn around and gave the power to who? France. So France could act as what? A third party. So you got one trustee, right? Listen. This is a trustee who's hiring managers to oversee the Moroccan Empire. So the Sultan turns around and does what? He hires who? A manager called France. So the Sultan was acting as the trustee, who hired France to come in and oversee what? The Moroccan Empire. You see what's happening? It just keeps repeating itself. They keep putting Moors in what you call a protectorate status. We're the protected people. But according to the treaties, we were supposed to be protecting them. What happened? It's called converso Moors. It's called COINTELPRO Moors. Right? It's called sellout Moors. We've been selling each other out. We got to stop doing this. We got to work together. We got to come back together as an organized dual society. We got to come back together as a battalion. We have to now be march step together. Your left, your left, your left, right. All of us together. How are we going to stop it this time? How are we going to stop this belligerence by our own people to undermine us? You know how we're going to stop it? It's called Moroccan law. When we enact Moroccan law through our competent Moorish states, we will stop this belligerence. We will stop this espionage. We will stop this sellout. We will stop this COINTELPRO. We will stop this converso. And we will hold people accountable for their actions. That must be understood. There will be no more trustees unless they're Moors. There will be no more managers unless they're Moors. What type of Moors? Moroccan Moors that are competent, that have full powers from the state. What is this about? What are we talking about? Let's keep it germane. What's it about? The Charter of the United Nations. It's about international law. The Charter acts as what? An HR department, an umpire, a referee to govern over disputes between states. And the Moors been marching and praying the whole time we needed a state in order for us to enact our own treaties. Those are the rules of engagement. You can't utilize the International Court of Justice unless you have what? A state. Only a state can be a party to a contentious dispute at the ICJ. And every time our leaders got closer and closer to figuring out the instructions, they got what? Neutralized. Why? Because they were still citizens of the United States. It's different this time. Why? Because we're not going to the UN first. First, we're going to do what? Check the boxes. To have what? I'll show you. Constitution that establishes the state. And what does the state do after that? Well, through your constitution, it establishes offices. And through those offices, you have what? Privileges and immunities. From who? Any belligerent foreign state or any belligerent foreign organization, i.e. corporation. Now let them touch us and find out what happens. They're going to find themselves in the ICC under the International Criminal Court, and they will be prosecuted. They will be brought to justice not only by our own consular court, but also by the ICC, because the consular court is also going to have a demand for those belligerent citizens of the United States to come to justice. Because now we can't just go to them and say, we want our civil rights. Them days are over. Civil rights is not your remedy. Civil rights is for who? People who suffer from a lack of knowledge of self. You don't know you're Moroccan. You're still Dred Scott, even with a fez on your head. Because you still don't know who you are because you keep saying you're Moorish American. You're not American, you're Moroccan. This time it's different. Our constitution will give us privileges and immunities. They can't touch us now, and they know it. Trust me when I tell you, I know. And if they do touch one of us, guess what? We have a class action lawsuit amongst all the Moorish states. We'll come together. We will bound ourselves together to become interdependent states to deal with any belligerent person of the United States. This must be understood. There ain't no more marching and praying. Ain't no justice, no peace chance no more. The power's in your own hands, as long as you know who you are. Noble Ali said what? Study, study, study. And when you think you have studied well, and you would ask me, what should I study next? Noble Ali said what? Study yourself. What does that mean? He realized you still don't know that you're Moroccan. Because if you knew you was Moroccan, you would know about the Moroccan treaties. You think Noble Ali didn't know about the Moroccan treaties? Of course he did. Why do you think he enacted a constitution? He recognized we needed a state. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to check the next applicable boxes to make sure his constitution was in conformity with international law. That's all right. At least he showed us the way. What did he tell us? The other half ain't been told. What's the other half? Noble statehood. With what? Constitution. Why did C.M. Bay write a constitution? He understood statehood. But unfortunately, he didn't check the other boxes. What boxes? Based upon international law. He didn't ratify, deposit, and promulgate. Noble Ali did not ratify, deposit, and promulgate. All the treaties came out prior to 1913. Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1787. Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1836. Treaty of Madrid, 1880. Treaty of Act Algeciras, 1906. Noble Ali, 1913. Noble Ali had the same obligations to adhere to the instructions as we do in the year 2022. Nothing's changed. The instructions remain the same. How is it that they was able to touch Noble Ali? Because he was still what? A citizen of the United States. Unfortunately, the good brother didn't have what? Privileges and immunities. He was not the officer of his state. He was a freedom fighter. He was a liberator. He was just missing one thing. Privileges and immunities from his state. What do we take away from this thus far? If France had this much power to enact the charter for the world, if France had that much power to establish the League of Nations for the world, if the Sultan had that much power to let France establish all this for the world, then imagine how much power you got as a Moor who have the power even before the Sultan, and you have the power before France, you have the power before the League of Nations, you have the power before the Charter. So who are you? You're powerful or you're powerless. There is no in between. People perish by the day for a lack of knowledge of self. I end with that. Islam.